Welcome to the TX Water Polo Podcast. I'm Joe Linehan, and James Smith is out of town again, and he's on vacation somewhere on the East Coast. And today we have a special podcast with Cathy Newsom and Dewey Newsom. Just Cathy and Dewey, they've been involved in water polo from the 70s through the 80s, all the way through the 2010s, and they have seen everything from high school to playing college back in the 70s to Masters water polo, and also reffing and coaching. So Cathy and Dewey, welcome, and thanks for doing this.
Thanks,
Howdy, Joe.
So here, why don't y'all give just your quick, like your quick and dirty version of kind of your background here. So Dewey.
Or you want me to, I started playing water polo when I was 7.
There you go. It's good.
Started swimming when I was 6 and started at 7 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. With our coach was originally Lori Goddard, who nobody really knows, but Reed Barnett was the one that really took us on. And we went to 15 and under nationals a couple of times, and the team went a lot of times. I went several times, and then got into college, and I went to Texas A&M, and I was in the rise and fall of Texas A&M water polo. My freshman year, we got to go to NCAAs. And the way it was done is that FOS had to get recognition for NCAA. It's a year-by-year thing. And they had a great team before I ever showed up. But I happened to get there and be on the varsity team. The first year, they got to go to NCAAs. My sophomore year, we did not make it. We lost to a team by 1 goal, so we didn't get in. And my junior year, we made it again. So we actually went to NCAAs twice out of 3 years, and then the next year Mel Nash came in, and they kind of kicked FOS off to the side throughout water polo.
We can get that here in a couple minutes, but how was playing for FOSDIC?
It was good. FOS was I talked to Vinny today. You may not know who Vincent is. Vincent Tavares, he was our goalie. Yeah. But Vincent put it perfectly. FOS was a visionary. He really, really saw water polo in Texas like what you're doing now. But he was doing it back in the 70s.
Yeah, when there was a lot less pools, a lot less water polo going on. So.
Yeah, no, you're right. But he's the one that started all the high school water polo teams.
And then the state championships and stuff like that.
State championship, he'd have that at A&M every year. And I think FOS, he started actually at A&M in 1970. And so by 76, he had a lot of stuff going on. A lot of teams coming in these tournaments, a lot of high school teams. Playing for FOS was interesting. He was a different guy, but he was good. And he really looked out for water polo.
And for those that don't know, the MVP trophy for high school water polo now in Texas is named after Dennis Fosdick, and Dennis Fosdick was the head coach at Texas A&M back in the 70s until about 1980, right? And then
it was
75, 76. 78.
79 is when FOS got ousted, and we actually played. He coached that that fall, and we went to indoors with him, and then he went to California that spring.
Okay. I mean, yeah. Was it? I got to know FOS a little bit as a kid at his developmental camps and such, and he was just a big cartoon character, type thing. But I just heard it was a lot of fun playing for him, and he did some great things for like Texas and the sport back then. But I mean, tell us a little bit about that. I swam for Mel Nash for a couple of years. Mel coming in, I guess he was a young guy, and it just was that transition from NCAA to club. So how did that happen?
We didn't get NCAA recognition.
So,
it was a year thing. FOS had to go talk to the athletic director each year and get us NCAA recognition.
Really? So it was a year-to-year thing?
Hey, Joe, they brought in Mel in the summer of that year when nobody was around. A lot of our guys thought, hey, we're gonna have a really good coach coming in, and come to find out when Mel showed up, and that's what I thought was gonna happen. I think they either told him no more water polo or he decided no more water polo, but that's when water polo quit.
That was right there, kind of after Title IX. A lot of teams started kind of dismantling their men's water polo programs then, and unfortunately, A&M got kind of caught up into it too. Now, didn't you also
But,
throw
but their women were playing there too. You're forgetting. They had a
Yeah, our women's were
phenomenal
playing, too.
women's team at A&M. The women's varsity was a varsity program as well, and they were recruited to come in and play water polo as well as swimming. They were all very good people.
No, like I mean, who was on the team from the women?
Debbie Starr was one of the. Debbie Starr was on it, and
Hogan.
Shirley
Hill.
Shirley Hill from California, Jeannie Hill from California. I mean, they brought in a lot. Oh, Yates's wife, Cathy Singletary Yates.
Okay.
Yeah, so they had some women that could play for sure.
Yeah.
So now, how did some of those California people transition from California to College Station, Texas?
They were recruited by Fawcett.
No, but okay.
How was the transition?
How was the transition? It's a little bit different world.
I don't know.
I went to A&M, and I know it's a different world. So
I can't speak for them.
Okay.
Well, Dewey had his own transition too. So,
yeah.
It was a different, back then in the 70s, the ratio of men to women was 25-1.
Yeah.
So right there alone was a big transition. So,
not too many women back then.
Not too many.
That's getting off point.
But so there was that alone, plus the fact that, you're all in Texas from California. But the nice thing about that is a lot of those guys stayed. They didn't all go back to California. They stayed in Texas. Like Yates, for example. He didn't go back to California. He stayed here.
Yeah, and he's still playing.
For swimming and water polo.
It's just, and it was great because water polo didn't completely go away at A&M. It kind of turned into a club, and that's what you did, Cathy, right? In the early 80s, you played club at A&M?
Vincent and I turned it into club.
Okay. Now, how was that first season after you turned it into club?
We went to indoors, but we had some women on our team, so they didn't like us. They didn't really. We had to forfeit all our games, but we had a great time.
Really?
Yeah.
Nationals.
These women they're talking about were 6'1", 6'2". They were good players and good swimmers, and they took them up to nationals and indoors, not NCAA's, but indoor nationals.
I firmly appreciate that you started the club there, because I actually ended up playing club at A&M back in the early 90s and into the middle of the 90s. And that's probably whenever I got to meet kind of you guys kind of for the first time, because we played in all the different Masters events and such like that. So, but just tell us a little bit about like the Masters team after you guys got out of kind of A&M, Rice, Hops, and kind of how that got started in the whole Masters water polo.
Rice was already, before I ever joined with them, they were already playing. Actually, you want to go way back, Steve McDonald used to be on the team called the Bunch. When I was in college, we played against them. That's where I first met Steve.
You mean, for those that don't know, Steve McDonald is Mac McDonald?
Yes.
Yeah. So
water polo, 610 Sports.
So he was on a team called the what?
The Bunch was the name of the team. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. And then Rice was like the precursor to Hops, correct?
Yes.
And what's the nickname?
Mark Stanley was the one that was running, and this is I think Mark Stanley was the one that was actually in charge of the Rice team for a while. I don't know how that happened, but he got me out there and a couple other people. And at the time I started, I think there was like 4 or 5 Rice people, or people from Rice, and then one guy was what ended up being in the end. And Rice had given him some money for like tournament entry fees and stuff like that. So that's when we changed the name to Hops, because we really didn't have any Rice students to warrant Rice paying for any of the.
But they gave you pool time too.
Yeah, they did give us pool time.
Yeah.
We practiced once a week, whether we needed it or not.
There you go. Now, what does Hops stand for?
Houston Obsolete Polo Squad.
It's not your favorite ingredient in your favorite beverage?
Well.
Or is a little dual meaning going right there?
So it's kind of derived like that. Actually, one of the old A&M guys came up with, when we were trying to name a name, TOPS, Texas Obsolete Polo Squad.
Okay.
And I looked at him and said, no, it's Hops. It's Houston Obsolete Polo Squad. So.
No, but it's
You know
just
who that was? That was Bradshaw.
Yeah, Jim Bradshaw.
Jim
was the one that
Bradshaw.
came up with tops.
Yeah, one of the A&M club players after us.
yeah. This is going back. These are all names that I kind of vaguely remember from back in the day. 'Cause I remember going and playing you guys and playing with you guys. I mean, there used to be a lot of like a ton of tournaments, like what 5 or 6 tournaments a year of just masters, and just I mean I just remember going up to the Dallas tournaments that Frank Connor used to run, and
It wasn't just Masters, Joe. It was we'd play all our college teams too. Texas would have tournaments. A&M would. Dallas would usually have 3 tournaments, and Hops even started to have tournaments later on down the road. So yeah, in Texas we had a lot of tournaments, and then we do a lot of traveling too.
yeah, I mean, just kind of remember the Dallas tournaments. I know like they used to also have like a lot of the indoor nationals and such at the old kind of North Lake College pool.
Yeah, they sure did. A couple of them.
And there was one, if I vaguely remember, was it probably what 90 sometimes, where the water was freaking cold.
Yes.
So did you play at that
It
one?
was also freezing outside, so you had a heater in the pool that didn't work, and you had freezing temperatures outside.
But they did have that big old hot tub there that I remember that you could go jump in real quick.
It's because you were jumping in it.
Yeah, and and there was no warming up. Let's just put it that way for that tournament. That's kind of what I remember.
Unless you were in a hot shower, yeah, or in the jacuzzi.
Warming up was in the shower.
And that's wherever I think I got my first taste of just kind of watching or playing against some of the greats, like the Terry Schroeders of the world and all those greats that were on the 84 and 88 and in the 92 teams.
Oh yeah. They had the goalie, the Olympic goalie that was there. He was there at one of those tournaments.
Yeah.
Some of those guys were just phenomenal, and we got to see them up close and personal in that pool.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. That was, I don't know if that was quite 25 meters or not. That was more like 25 yards, but that's okay. I mean, because it got a little shallow kind of quick there.
The problem is for some of those goalies, the bottom, the shallow end was shallow. They were standing on the bottom.
It didn't matter kind of whether they had a bottom or not. We weren't going to score on them anyway. So there you go. But
it was Wilson in the cage.
Yeah, Craig Wilson.
So like you mentioned that you guys kind of, this is something that I know that teams don't necessarily do as much as they used to, but like kind of travel, like as a Masters team from Houston, Hops goes and travels and plays. So kind of where did y'all go and travel and play?
Oh geez, we went to Albuquerque a bunch of times. We went to a lot of indoor nationals.
St. Louis.
We went to St. Louis, Chicago, Florida, Atlanta, yeah.
So just a ton of good trips. I remember, I think I was living up in New York and coaching up there, and I think I met you guys in Atlanta for a couple tournaments.
Well, I remember when you flew in to play for us in Albuquerque one.
That was where we had that was whenever we had 4 dudes from A&M.
Yeah. Eric Doyle,
Brent Coffey, myself, and Oscar Canales, and
just for the audience, Eric Doyle was the
Blue Angel
commander.
Yes, and yes, and we actually flew in a 4-seater Cessna from A&M College Station to Albuquerque, and that was probably a big old mistake because we're like, oh, this is going to be less expensive than a Southwest flight, and let's just say we don't fly over the mountains there.
Yeah,
we fly between the mountains.
Over the Sandia Mountains.
And that is
came into that tournament. We had to play like 30 minutes once you got to the airport.
Yeah, and
every one of you were green.
Yes, that was even Eric, that like a pilot. And we had to leave a day early. We got back a day late, so we actually lost money on that trip. But it was a good story. I mean, I still, because we had to stop about 5 times just to refuel, and I still remember just going into the the runway at Roswell, and we were coming in sideways because of the crosswind was so bad. I have never stepped foot in a Cessna since, and I don't think I ever will. So there you go. But hey, but Eric did become the commander of the Blue Angels. So there you go. He took it to the next level. So
way much more than the next level.
Than the Cessna pilot.
Yeah.
So it's good that you all lived through that experience.
Yeah.
And so now, another thing that a lot of people probably don't remember or haven't even heard of is the Olympic Fest tournaments.
Yeah, actually, it started out National Sports Fest, and they started in 1978. And I think what they were trying to do is emulate what Russia was already doing. And so it was a big tournament, not tournament, but a big Olympics, basically. And they divided the country in North, East, South, and West. And they had every sport that was in the Olympics, the Summer Olympics, and some that were in the Pan Am Games on the Olympic shed. And it was a lot of fun. 70 was the first year, and it was in Colorado Springs.
So it was like a little Olympic village.
Yeah,
and
they had the Olympic village. You had, as a participant, an athlete, they gave you a tag, and you'd go look at any other sports you wanted to go look at. So we saw, I mean, through several of those I went to, I saw a lot of different sports that are a lot of fun to go watch. I've never been able to see before.
Now, like they ended those things, what, in the mid 90s?
95, yeah.
Yeah. And like I know one of the last ones was in San Antonio. And for those that don't know, the Olympic Fest, again, it was split up into 4 teams. There would always be players from Texas that were represented on, what was it, the Southeast team?
South.
Yeah, like you get like the South team. And I think you probably played on that team numerous times, right?
Yeah, I went to 5 of them.
There you go.
And it could have gone to a couple more, but things just didn't fall into place for me. You know, life, work.
Yeah, like, adulting.
You really want to play for. Sit on the bench for.
But those things were great. I mean, I missed the boat as far as being a little too young to play on those, but I definitely remember going and watching those things.
Do you remember
definitely
the one in San Antonio?
Oh, what was that?
Do you remember seeing the one in San Antonio?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. And I mean, that was over in Palo Alto and stuff like that, and they played there. It's just, there was a lot of water polo going on. Just a lot of people think that there just wasn't a whole lot back in the 70s and 80s, but there was a ton of water polo going on. And you guys also had a little bit, Cathy, you kind of coached a little bit too for high school, kind of refereed here or there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I coached swimming, water polo, and supervised diving. And then after 6 years of that, I started a business. And Dewey was still playing, and so was I, kind of off and on with the hops team. But it was kind of a natural fit when there was a lull in refereeing. They needed people, and so I would draw my referees from the hops group because easier to teach when they already know how to play.
Yes.
And a lot of them were willing to take the time and to give back to the sport at that level, at the high school level. So it was a good fit. I think I did that for like 10 years. I was the coordinator of the Houston water polo group. And my job was to try to get people in and then get them tested and improved to where we could send them to JOs in California or, to referee club. We kind of fed the club system too. Dennis Lawrence was in charge. Bart Garson was refereeing then. Smith was refereeing. There was, we had a whole group. In fact, a lot of the coaches now that are coaching were part of that group when they were in high school and college.
Like Scott Slay?
Scott Slay, yeah. They would play for hops and they would ref, and then they would go to school. And by refereeing, they made pretty good money, especially if you were good. You got to get a lot of good games in. And so it was kind of a win-win for them. They could make a fair amount of money and not have to do a normal job. And yet they were going to go into coaching anyway, so.
And like Scott and Justin Pudwell. And Justin Pudwell coached at a Division III school in California for 10 years.
Yeah. Markowitz, TJ Markowitz was one of my refs. A whole bunch of them refed, and that was it was a good time to be a part of all that. Those guys were young, athletic. They had also played college, so it was easy to put them on the deck. Justin would grow a goatee so he wouldn't look so baby faced when he was up there refereeing. He's 21
I think he still has the goatee. I think he still has the goatee a little bit.
Does he? We haven't seen him in years. And it was fun for us because they'd be playing with hops. And, after games or whatever, if they were close by, they'd be invited for dinner or swim or whatever. So it was always a good time with us. We like to cook. They'd come over, they'd eat, be jolly,
I mean, and there was a little bit of an issue there, like in the mid 2000s or early 2000s, kind of whenever you kind of stepped away a little bit. Just tell us a little bit about that with the the coaches and the referees kind of went at it? I mean, coaches and referees always go at it, but this was outside the pool.
Yeah, there was a big problem. We wanted the referees to be independent of the coaches,
Mm-hmm.
and we really promoted the education of the referees to stand on their own 2 feet, so to speak.
Yep. Well, of course.
And which is the way it should be. Well, some of the coaches here in Houston didn't like that aspect of it and started resenting that these high school referees were going off and refereeing in these other places. And then in some ways I felt like they were threatened, because our referees like Dennis and Bart Boston and Dennis Lawrence, even Smith, I mean, they were refereeing at JOs. Some of those coaches had never even coached at JOs.
Of course,
And yet,
yeah.
so now the tide had turned as to who knew what, right? Before it was the coaches knowing everything and their opinion, and now the referees had their own share of knowledge and their opinions and stuff. So it was, and then one of the senior coaches retired from teaching and coaching, and the coaches decided that guy should be in charge of the Houston high school referees, and pretty much separated our group from them.
And then within a couple of years, that coach actually came to a JT Wall up in North Texas and said, I can't do this. Can you please do this? And it came back around to be its own kind of a separate kind of entity. That only lasted for a couple of years, but the shame of it was that a ton of really good referees just stopped refereeing.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. It's like having a senior when you have a freshman. The senior is not only there because he's a senior, but he helps teach the freshman. Well, the same way in refereeing, you develop a referee similar to you would develop a player. They come in at a certain level, and then you put them in positions to become a better referee, to handle different pressures and those kinds of things. Yeah, all that was gone. That they didn't have the leadership. You didn't have the opportunities to referee outside the little bubble, the high school bubble. It was, it was not a good thing in the long run. But on the other side, it did help form the statewide organization. We were already kind of center of the statewide organization as far as, sharing our referees with San Antonio or whoever was having a tournament. But it also helped, I think, by having that huge dropout. I think it helped mesh the whole state together as far as officials.
I mean, basically, probably one of the reasons why they wanted, they tried it on their own for a couple of years. It just didn't work out necessarily. It's just that there was a big explosion of the number of teams that were playing back in the late 90s or the late 2000s, and it was just too much. And they needed back in the day, I told JT, we need Cathy back. We need Dennis back. But I don't think that you guys were coming back anytime soon. So.
Debbie Starr, another example. But for me, the position was that I refereed some, but I was basically a coordinator and organizer because I had hops. Yeah. I had that phone list for those hops players. I needed a referee. Hey, will you go out? If you already passed the test, will you go out and referee these 5 games for me? And because they had all that experience, being in Houston, you get some water polo players from all over the country that play college or international or whatever. I could put them on the deck and they'd be better than most people would be. And they lost that when they lost me to a certain extent. You didn't have that influx.
And be honest with you, we're still
level of people coming in.
We're still searching for that right mix. Still to this day. I mean, we're still a little bit behind the curve for the referees. So, it's grown a lot, and we just haven't grown the referees at the same rate. So, but I think that's the same thing from across sports and in water polo around the country. It's like we never have enough referees. So now, did you ever get out on the pool deck and ref?
For about 1 year.
And that's about all you could take from it?
Yeah. I was in a high school game, and it was really bad.
It is hard.
Dutchy Kudeman was a ref too that same game. It was he and I. Dutchy was another guy that he was at A&M with me. He was a freshman the same year. He played, both NCAAs. So we're reffing this game, and these kids were just beating the heck out of each other. You're calling foul right and left. I think parents are screaming at you, yada, yada, yada. And when the game got over and these kids start coming up to me and telling me how horrible I was as a ref, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, you don't lose a game 19-1 because of the refs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it is. I mean, I've had to put on my referee hat and teach referees, and sometimes it's the hardest thing is to referee and keep your mouth shut whenever kids are doing dumb stuff in the pool or coaches are doing dumb stuff. You just gotta.
You just want to sit them down and say, hey, coach.
Yeah, exactly. Now that's something that's something that you did back in the 80s, right? So like as like the rise of high school water polo kind of happened in Houston throughout the 80s and throughout the 90s, you mentored a number of coaches back then, right?
Yeah, I did. Actually, the first one was Barbie Sampson at Clear Creek High School. I went and helped her team, and they only played for like a year. And we ended up they just started, and they ended up taking both teams to state, girls and boys. And then things kind of fell apart. So then, it was really a couple things happened during that time frame. Steve McDonald, back in 78 for the first Sports Fest, he was the manager of Foz's team. That's where I really learned to meet Steve. And so when I was at Clear Creek coaching, I called Steve, because he was already pretty well set at North Shore at the time. And he came in and gave us a goal and gave us caps and gave us balls just to, help get our team started, which is really cool of him.
Yeah, I mean that's still today. There's teams that, so you want to start? Here's an old goal. Here's some old balls. That's just how it still works, even to this day. And you can help Tom Landgraf at Clear Lake and some other coaches down there, right?
Landgraf was when he was at Baytown Sterling.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because after that year, I called Tom and said, hey, I need a place to kind of do some workout. And he goes, I'd love you to come in and help work with my kids. So I came in and helped work with his kids, and they did pretty well that year. I think they came in third in state that year. And I think they won state.
And there's a ton of people from Hops back in the 80s that really just helped out behind the scenes that, nobody really necessarily remembers because they didn't win like Coach of the Year or something like that. But without people like the both of you, I don't believe high school water polo kind of would have grown like it did in Houston. So I do thank you for doing that and such.
Yeah. There was a Hops guy that coached the Rice women's team. They were club, but they ended up winning nationals or got second. Remember that about 15 years ago? That guy was a Hops guy, and he just did it on volunteer basis. Just went out and started coaching those girls. They were good.
I think that was. I mean, it all blends. It all blends nowadays.
The time is different, but so over the years, a lot of people have contributed. You're exactly right, in different ways. Even then to go in, even to help with the little kids, or to help referee, or they used to have those one-day tournaments on Saturdays where a little high school team would come out and play against Hops and an Austin team, and it was just like a little round robin, and then everybody would go home. It was just a day tournament. Those were always really good for the kids, to develop, getting up against the big boys and playing, and it was just no one had to travel very far. And
because.
And Joe, and back in the day, and actually in my childhood water polo playing, we intermixed the girls and the guys in practice all the time. We had some of the most vicious girls I've ever seen. They were a lot worse than the guys.
They still are.
They were brutal.
They still are.
And so at Hops, once going through college, at Hops, I encouraged all girls to come out and play, and encouraged a whole lot of high school kids to come out and play. So I think just as them coming out to scrimmage with us and play with us, we developed a lot of those high school kids that weren't going to get developed the way they would have if they just played high school ball.
Exactly. I mean, I still remember kind of moving to Houston back in the early 2000s, and I probably talked to you guys about this kind of even before I moved. But there was a lot of high school water polo, and they played during the summer during the old Jalapeno League, right? And some of the better kids would go out to Hops, but there was a bit of a need for youth water polo, and I know that you guys got out of the sport in the early 2010s, but just in that time frame, there was a bit of a rise of youth water polo club, and just almost how it's kind of almost overtaken the whole it used to be only Masters club. Though there were 5 tournaments a year, and they were all Masters men's. and now like you guys kind of saw the growth of that like kind of a little bit. I mean, just any thoughts as far as that's concerned?
Well, we have a couple Hops players. Their kids played during that developmental plan, and one of them is still playing in San Antonio. So we got to see it as, you know, the friends of the parents, right? You know, that they were in all the tournaments the kids were going to. And it not only did it help with the organization and having that year-round water polo, but the fact that finally Houston developed some really nice pools that had double deep ends. Right. And that was always our problem is you could have 5 great pools, but they'd always have a shallow end. Right. So with all the growth in the Houston area and Dallas, you got new pools and they all had deep ends, double deep ends. So that really helped water polo, and it helped take the crap out of water polo, quite frankly. I mean, if you can stand on the bottom, you know, life is a lot different than if you have to swim the whole difference. And it's harder to referee, it's harder to play in, it can get more physical and out of line very quickly because everybody can stay on the bottom. So I think just the growth in the fact that we had more facilities, plus of course the influx of the club program, year-round program for the kids. And the kids nowadays are different. They don't want to swim up and down that line like we did. Yeah. Can you imagine those kids swimming 4 and 5 hours a day like we did, lifting weights, and that's all they did? No water polo?
Oh, we have kids where I've literally had kids where we've had to teach them how to do a flip turn before they were going into high school, but they had been playing water polo for 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, and they ended up becoming like, you know, and they were like, you know, 2150 freestyle or 20.50 freestylers. They were great swimmers. They just didn't know how to do a flip turn.
Right.
They didn't know how to swim with their head down. I mean, they just had to learn that from their swim coach, but you know, they played water polo first. Wow. Then they swam.
And that's the huge difference now, because before the majority of the swimmers, they would play water polo.
Yeah.
So that's a huge difference. Now you're getting the broader athlete coming into the sport versus just getting a pure swimmer playing the sport.
Yeah, and there's a lot more competitions now for the youth. Like, I mean, every weekend there's an opportunity to play club water polo almost between the end of high school season and the beginning of the next high school season. Mm-hmm. It is truly a year-round kind of endeavor. There's been a ton of people that have been part of it. You guys were part of it. I still remember doing the Houston Summer Open, you know, with you guys, you know, kind of back in the day, back in 2003, we first started that down in Fort Bend. And then, you know, it just, you know, just getting more events and just kind of more people. More
coaches.
I mean, we never have enough coaches. We're going to talk about this. Like, we have the fall UIL season coming in 2021.
Yeah, congratulations on getting that passed. That they had tried years ago. It's a wonderful thing for the sport.
If they did not try years ago, we would not be able to have finished it. But there's a lot of people that were part of it. But, you know, we're going to have a ton of coaches that don't even know what water polo is, that are be coaching high school water polo.
Mm-hmm. That's not any different than 20 years ago.
Or 30.
Well, yeah.
It's, to be honest with you, it's not that different than 5 years ago either. So it's just, but you know, if you're a good coach and you want to learn it, you can learn. It's probably a little bit easier to get stuff and learn now than trying to go to the library and checking out a water polo book or something like that, or going to a practice and watching. You can get there's a ton of resources, and the water polo season the high school water polo season is moving back to the fall. It's gonna be fun.
Well, I have my own opinion on that as an ex-coach. So
be a lot of fun.
We played fall water polo when I was coaching, and so I started water polo with a high school that I was the head coach of, and we had this great distance swimmer, just great miler, just top notch, you know, world country ranked and stuff. He was at A&M there a couple years ahead of you and your brother, I think. But anyway, so he could swim, just constant 52s, 53s, you know, just one of those. Yep. You know, same. But he had never broken a 50.0 in 100 freestyle. Never. Not even come close.
Yeah.
After water polo, he played water polo. He loved it. He was an athlete. He loved it. First meet, 49.2.
That's what it is.
And I can't tell you that the confidence that developed in that kid. I mean, just to think, man, I can sprint now, or at least I can be competitive in it. And that just helped his 200. It helped his 500. So I use that as an example all the time of that. Water polo really can help a swimmer as well.
And I mean, we only
vice versa.
like the water polo community moved the sport to the spring just to have something that didn't conflict with high school swimming to help it grow, because it was losing the number of teams that was playing. It was only like about 30 or 35 at the time. So now it's at about 150 to 160 kind of total schools, throughout the state that are playing. The water polo coaches and the swim coaches, they weren't necessarily the ones that decided to move it to the fall. It was the UIL, because there's just less sports that are played during the fall. So that was an opening there. And obviously the water polo community was like, yes, we're not going to question it. Yes, please. And it's one of those things where as a club coach, I would much rather the season be a fall season. I've always said that, because now, as soon as they're done with high school swimming in February, it is 6-7 months kind of leading up to JOs at the end of July. So I mean, it's just it's not broken up now. It used to be the primary club season was the summer and fall, with JOs kind of in the middle. And then not as many kids kind of would play in the fall. Now it's going to be just gearing up and going, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun. There's going to be lots of challenges, but I mean, this is we had a lot of water polo back in the 70s, kind of in 80s, and there is no end in sight now. I mean, it is out there, and I'm looking forward to it. And I appreciate that for you guys kind of coming on, with us today. This has been fun going down kind of memory lane. I do appreciate it. Yeah, Cathy and Dewey, kind of thanks a lot. I do appreciate it.
All right. Hey, it was good to talk to you, Joe.
All right, and that's a TX Water Polo podcast. And there's no special things about our donors or sponsors, because I don't know them. James is not here to say it. So this will be posted at txwaterpolo.com. Thanks, and take care, everybody.